Thank you and welcome back to At World's Edge, the fantasy lore podcast. We're going to be taking a break from Warhammer Fantasy this week and talking instead about maps and legends, what makes a great fantasy map. This subject is pretty important for those of you who are interested in doing role-playing or war tabletop gaming, computer modding for games, or even just those who really like looking at the maps. It's definitely a big part of a lot of games nowadays, and it's been that way for a long time. So we're going to jump into what makes us so intrigued as gamers and as readers, as aficionados of fantasy lore, and what keeps drawing us into these worlds. So why are maps important? To put it from the master himself, J.R.R. Tolkien, it wisely started with a map. In Tolkien's opinion, all of his creativity with being able to write the Lord of the Rings effectively, which is one of the seminal works on fantasy in the modern sense of the word, was because he started with the map first. Essentially, it grounded him in the world he wanted to create. When he knew where his characters were, it allowed him to just move them on the board, almost like a person is moving a chess piece, rather than having to move them around and then also think about, oh, okay, well, they walked into the door and they kicked open the door, and then what was there? Well, he already knew it was there because he'd already created the land for them to walk around in first. DMing a game is very similar. You need to create the world first. Now, luckily, so many games nowadays, Dungeons & Dragons, Vampire Masquerade, Warhammer Roleplay, Gloomhaven, whatever you're playing roleplay-wise, already creates the world for you, or at least a base version of it, and then you just have to populate it with your thoughts and ideas. So you have that world or the room that you're creating. Maps are the way that we look at that. That we look at that world in a visual representation, and that's why they're so important. So what makes a good one is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, when we're talking about fantasy maps, a lot of times we're thinking about the map that we have in the background there, and a lot of times we're confusing old maps with fantasy maps. An old map may be one that looks like this one, which is a map called the Saint Sever Beatus map of the world. It's from the 10th century, and it's really not a fantasy map. It's just a bad map of the world. You'll notice that the entire world is circular. It fits surrounded by this ocean. And this is Europe, it's Africa's here, all of Asia is here. The Mediterranean Sea is this weird whale-shaped thing. It's not purposefully fantastical. It's just bad. It doesn't inspire us in any way. It's just a bad map. Versus another old map by Amerigo Vespucci of the New World. And Amerigo Vespucci was basically a promoter. He made maps to try and get people to go to the New World. And if you'll notice, his map was much more of a fantasy map than the first one there was. They're both wildly inaccurate. But Amerigo Vespucci's map has a lot of place names that he couldn't possibly know about and are largely fantastical. It has giant creatures which did not exist. It has land masses that don't exist. But all of these are designed to inspire the viewer to go out and explore the world, to go out and let their imagination soar and get out there and see the world, which is exactly what your fantasy map should do. So when you're looking for inspiration, if you're making your own map, for example, you can use old maps as examples. Just remember the difference between an old map and a fantasy map. A fantasy map should inspire you. It shouldn't just look old. So what is that? What makes a good fantasy map? Let's take a look at those pieces. The folks who have been making the Skyrim and Oblivion and the Elder Scrolls series in general have done a great job with fantasy maps. Their fantasy maps show a variety of landscapes. They show water, fields, roads, forests, mountains, cities, rivers, and then they have mysterious areas. And we know these areas from the rest of the lore if you've been playing it. But that's important because it inspires you to read the rest of the lore. Like, you know what High Rock is if you're an aficionado of the Elder Scrolls series. You know what Cyrodiil is, Morrowind. You know what's up with the Sea of Ghosts if you've read any of the books, or if you played the text-based computer game from the 90s, I'm sorry, early 2000s. But if you don't, it inspires you to go learn that. Or better yet, it inspires you to create your own world around those for your character in these great sandbox games to go and explore. But besides those, it just gives you a reason to explore these maps. Remember, these games are, again, sandbox games. It gives you a reason to, and your character actually starts off here-ish. It gives you a reason to have your character explore this region. Like, you can follow this river and be like, where does it go? I'm curious. And you follow it until you can't follow it anymore. And along the way, you're clearing that map. You're filling it in with words. You're finding treasures and monsters and fauna and flora. Like, you're exploring, just like Amerigo Vespucci wanted us to do in his maps. You're inspired to explore the world around you. That's what these maps ask us to do. And other games do it well also. This older one from Final Fantasy VII, if you'll notice, has a variety of different biomes. Since this is a whole world map rather than just a small region, they've got northern poles, deserts, and they're doing a pretty good job of keeping deserts in the same kind of geographic band. They've got plains, mountains, forests, and then they've got regions that just look interesting. And this is important on any fantasy map because, unlike the real world, fantasy maps are fantastical, right? We know, because it's a game, that there's something to be found in these explored areas. The game has built-in treasures for us. So these areas here, we are inclined to go search them because they're dark, and dark places may have monsters, they may have treasures. We're inclined to go get them. Even areas on the map which seem to indicate "come explore me," like here, are things that we may be drawn to, and we're like, hey, you know what? Let's go explore them. It's almost like an invitation to come to this area and explore places. And that's what your map should do. It should draw you into a particular place and give you a reason to go there versus somewhere else. This contrasts sharply with some of the more frustrating examples. And I'm going to hate myself and I might get some flack in comments, but one of my earliest maps was Chrono Trigger, consistently one of the best games ever. But its map was very, very elementary. It's got these chicken nugget looking things over here that are supposed to be mountains. It's got some forests, but if you notice, this is a world map, and everything in this world is the same biome. It's got some plains, and then, like, I guess no grass grows here, but other than that, it's pretty much the same. It's got so few major cities. You're supposed to believe that wars were fought here in the past, but like 8 people live in this world. How are any wars fought here? It's got one political unit. In reality, did this country wipe out this country? It didn't seem like they did. It seemed like a war was fought and it kind of came to a standstill. So this map, it doesn't inspire you to explore. It inspires you. It's more like it's very much an RPG, and it's more like just a questing game almost from a map perspective. It doesn't really beg you to explore and find things. And that's a limitation partially of its scale, except that right around the same time was Final Fantasy VI, actually a year before, if I'm not mistaken, and it had a wonderful map that begged you to explore the world around it. It had treasures, monsters all over the place. It was really a very different experience. And Chrono Trigger actually came with 7 different world maps inside of it because of the different timelines and options and all things like that. So the Chrono Trigger map, you can see the vast difference between the ones we just looked at in Skyrim and Final Fantasy VII, and then this one here. There's just not a lot going on. And a much newer game, so it's not just a matter of timeline, is the map for Zelda, and Zelda from its very first one to its most current one has had an issue with creating an engaging map. And fans have done a great job fleshing out this map. But if you look at this guy here, this is just about the worst map to look at. Even the names, Hyrule Field, Hyrule Ridge, Gerudo Highlands, these don't inspire me to want to go visit these places. And the features on the map look like oil spills or, I don't know, scribbles. They don't really tell me what this is. Is this a building? Is it a mountain? I don't know, and I don't care because you haven't made me invested in it. The names kind of, they might bring a little bit of nostalgia since I've been playing the series for 30 years, but even then, I'm not super drawn in, and that's a problem. Honestly, this kind of looks like just hot springs all over the place. In reality, the only hot springs are right here, up in the top hand corner. So, bad map. It doesn't inspire me to go explore anywhere. It doesn't tell me anything about it. It doesn't fire the imagination. But none of them at all are as bad as the Fallout series. And to be fair, Fallout is by nature dreary. But that doesn't mean that it's not a bad map, and the map is dreary to an extreme. Based on the idea of a dystopian metro map, kind of like what you might find if the Soviet Union had kept on going, the only discernible feature on this map is this river, the Potomac, which cuts right through the center. Other than that, you have some roads. I say that hesitantly because I'm not sure you can even follow them in the game. I really don't remember. And it does kind of look like a map, but I'm not entirely certain why you would see it this way and why you wouldn't have created a paper map. I'm just thinking that even using, yeah, you'd have your Pip-Boy, but it's such a small screen. I feel like as the lone survivor, you might, not the lone survivor in this one, as the Vault 101 escapee, you might have gone ahead and made a paper map. I don't know. In any case, it's a very boring map. It doesn't add to the game's overall flavor in any way. It doesn't inspire you to do much other than get through it, get to the center of town, and go see the wonderful artscape they created out of the National Mall, which was 100% worth playing the game for. But we've shown a lot of bigger maps. Does the size matter? Am I saying to you that you can't have a good map unless it shows something grand? Absolutely not. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has done a wonderful job of showing absolutely beautiful maps created in the Games Workshop universe. This is the Empire. It's the center polity of the Warhammer world. It's where most of the action takes place all the time. And right in the center of this map, we can see the city of Middenheim, city of the White Wolf. And it's this tiny city right here. It's not even the biggest city here. In fact, the province of Middenheim isn't even listed here. But it's got a great city. So you've got a great map, great details. This is highly engaging, as we talked about, mountains, different colors, rivers. You could make lots of adventures going around on this map in different kinds of things, especially since you know, there's different races. There's elves over here, there's dwarves over here, there's chaos over here. Different men live in Kislev versus the Empire versus Britannia. The demons can pop out of anywhere. Like there's just so much to do over here. Middenheim, same thing. We know that there's walls encapsulating the city because we see them. If you wanted to make an adventure that takes place in a sewer, you see that there's water, you see that there's a park, you see that there's tons of neighborhoods with accompanying streets. You see palaces over here, you see shrines, you see all sorts of things on this map, plenty of things that you could work with here as far as doing a role-playing game. And even getting down to the microcosm level, that palace we talked about, you could even have this map here. Again, even though it's just black and white, you don't need color, you don't need size. Buildings, park, grand buildings, like there's and exterior walls. There is a lot of different things you can do with this map. This map here of the Palace District is almost more interesting than the entire map of the Chrono Trigger world. And I would say 100% more interesting than the Fallout 3 map. This map here is more inspiring to create stories around because it shows me things I can do. It fires the imagination, as we just talked about. You could imagine making a story starting with your character, maybe a thief or a con artist, coming in through the city, engaging in the Connick's Garden, encounter here, decide what you have to do, and then proceeding through the garden, more encounters, and then making a decision. Does he go into the Square of Marshals and deal with military folk, or does he go into the palace, deal with political folk? I don't know. That's up to your players. You're the games master. You don't make the decisions for them. Remember, your lore build, just like Tolkien said, your lore will grow around the world you build for it. Tolkien built this map, but his characters started here in the Shire. All he had to do after he created his characters after he created his map was walk them. They went to Bree, had an encounter. Went to Weathertop, had an encounter. Had an encounter in the mountains. Had an encounter in Lothlorien, went down the river, split up. Some went to Rohan, some kept going. Like the story of Lord of the Rings was told in this map. But more importantly, Erebor wasn't in the Lord of the Rings, but it was the centerpiece of The Hobbit. We didn't really see much about the Iron Hills, but we heard about them, and we're going to hear more about them, I can imagine, in the Lord of the Rings television series. Horondar we didn't hear about except as in passing, as the men of the South. These creatures out here give us the impression that the seas are active and full of things to do as well. Maybe we'll see some more naval stuff. The white ships leaving from the harbors, a great image. Not so much the one I'm drawing right now, that's just for me. Arnor, lots of stories up there that we never get to see because it's beyond the scope of Tolkien's story. And what I'm pointing out is that all of this is stuff that I'm just finding on the map right now. I don't write my scripts ahead of time, so I'm just seeing it now on the map really for the first time because I'm taking a look at it, and that's what a good map does. It inspires us to look and explore and create the story because the land is already there. We just need to populate it with our ideas. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found this instructional and fun, and that you'll click like and subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and have them view as well. I'd love to keep this going. I've loved the outpouring of views and support and comments that I've had so far, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.